Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
Was it America's greatest idea, preserving the country's unique areas and historical sites? And what about those units in our state? What challenges does the National Park Service face here in Idaho? Call in with your questions. Stay tuned. Dialogue is next. Hello, I'm Joan Cartan-Hansen. Thank you for joining us here on Idaho Public Television, on the World Wide Web, and on public radio stations. Starting this Sunday, filmmakers Ken Burns and Dayton Duncan tell the story of a radical, uniquely American idea that special places should be preserved for everyone. From Arcadia to Yosemite, Americans treasure nearly 400 national parks, monuments, historical sites, and other heritage areas. Idaho claims 5 major National Park Service assets. Craters of the Moon National Monument and Preserve, a vast ocean of lava flows, cinder cones, and sagebrush. The Nez Perce National Historical Park that marks the important events and places associated with the battles between the Nez Perce and the U.S. Army. The Hagerman Fossil Beds National Monument, one of the largest concentrations of late Pliocene fossil deposits found anywhere in the world. The Minidoka National Historical Site, preserving the site of the Minidoka Internment Camp, or Camp Hunt, where Japanese Americans were relocated during World War II, and the City of Rocks National Reserve, a unique collection of more than 60 granite pinnacles and monoliths with some of the world's best rock-climbing trails. These five National Park Service units are Idaho's gift to the world, but what challenges do they face, and what opportunities do they offer? Joining me now to explore these areas are 3 of Idaho's National Park Superintendents. In our Moscow studio is Gary Summers, Superintendent of the Nez Perce Historical National Park. Thank you for joining us there, sir.
I'm glad to be here.
In our Pocatello studio is Doug Neighbors, Superintendent of Craters of the Moon National Monument and Preserve. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Good evening, Joan.
Good evening. And in our Boise studio is Wallace Keck, Superintendent of the City of Rocks National Reserve. Now, you are also part of the Idaho Park Service Department. Could you explain that dual role for me?
Right. When Congress created the reserve, they created it as a partnership. And so the Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation actually is the on-ground manager at City of Rocks with the partner, the National Park Service.
And I'm sorry, your colleague, Wendy Jansen from the Hagerman Fossil Beds and Minidoka site couldn't join us tonight. But we want you to join the conversation. Give us a call, toll-free at 1-800-973-9800. So is the idea of the national parks, was that America's greatest idea? I'll give each of you a chance. Wallace, why don't we start with you?
Well, I would say that it ranks right up there. And you know, the idea of democracy and all men are created equal ranks pretty high. But because in the national parks, democracy is lived out and those stories are told of who we are as a people and as a culture, I would say that in a sense it is.
And Gary, why do you think the national parks are among America's best ideas?
Well, I think it's an excellent idea because we are preserving our greatest natural treasures and our greatest cultural treasures and the history of the country, where people can go and see where historical events actually happened rather than just reading about them in the books.
And Doug, Craters of the Moon, that's definitely unique. Why is it a good idea to preserve it?
To preserve it is for its natural and cultural resources, primarily its volcanic features. But America's best idea is unique, and originally back in Europe, many of the large landscapes were private reserves for the noble, and once the United States was formed, these areas were preserved for the people.
Let me ask a little bit about each site, because quite often people have never been to it. Gary, let's start up north. Tell us a little bit about the Nez Perce Historical Park.
Well, what you said about Nez Perce is what most people think about, and that is the War of 1877. And we do preserve a number of sites associated with that war, but our mandate at the park is actually much greater than that. Our job is to tell the story of the entire history of the Nez Perce people in the Northwest, and that goes back about 10,000 years. So we preserve legend sites, historical sites, battle sites, And we have 38 sites spread across 4 states, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and Montana. So one of our biggest challenges is just distance.
And Doug, how about you? Craters of the Moon. Tell us
Craters of the
about that.
Moon was preserved for its volcanics features. The Great Rift is one of the largest and longest continental rift systems, certainly in North America. And many of the features associated with rift volcanism are located here at Craters of the Moon. So you can go to one spot in the United States and find many different features.
I've heard it described as one of the world's best classrooms if you're going to teach geology.
We certainly receive quite a few university summer field programs that come through the area, and many geologists do look in the area, but it's a vast area and many areas are not mapped, and a lot more to explore and study.
And while City of Rocks may be one that a lot of Idahoans have never been to.
Yeah, and when most people think of City of Rocks, they think of the grand scenery of those granite pinnacles. But really, it's more than that. It is the story of America moving west. The California Trail, some of the best stretches of the California Trail are protected within the City of Rocks, and that tells a story of the pioneers from 1843 to about 1882. And as they moved through, they interacted with the landscape. They were awestruck. And you can still get that same experience today. We preserve the same awestruck experience they had. They wrote their names in axle grease on the rocks, and they left ruts in the landscape, and it's still there to experience that history.
The other two, we don't have our representative for the other two, but Hagerman came in about the same time as the City of Rocks.
City of Rocks National Reserve, Hagerman fossil beds were part of the Idaho-Arizona Act, 1988.
And it is one of those amazing collections of late Pliocene fossils. It's absolutely beautiful. And the Minidoka, there's not much at Minidoka yet. It's fairly recent.
Some remnants on the ground of Minidoka that you can tangibly connect the story to.
Right.
But most recently, Bainbridge Island in the Seattle area has been brought into the Minidoka, because that's where many of the Japanese folks came from originally to the site in Minidoka.
Well, let's go to our first caller here. Michelle in Grangeville. Michelle?
Yes, hello, I'm here. I'm kind of new to Idaho, only been here 14 years, but I thoroughly enjoy the state. It's beautiful, and I'm a big advocate of national parks, national forests. But I'm wondering if your panel can kind of address the reservation system that needs to be used now by phone or by online, and you have to use plastic. And I don't know if they've had any comments from anyone, if they have any plans to make it a little more accessible locally, the reservation system. So
Okay.
that's my question.
Okay.
I'll take that. You
Wallace?
bet.
Okay.
We have a reservation system, the Reserve America, and a lot of our clientele in the early days really liked the serendipitous nature of just coming and not having to make a reservation. But our vacation time is so small, and there's such demands that people want to plan ahead. And you want to be sure that if you're going to make a trip across the country to one of our national parks, that you can actually find a site when you get there. The way to guarantee that is the reservation system. And yes, the credit card system is the way it is now. So,
And
Go ahead.
at Craters of the Moon, it's opposite. We rarely fill up with camping, so we do not implement a reservation system. Basically first come, first serve, and it's rarely filled.
How about up north?
We don't have any campgrounds,
Oh, there you go.
so we don't have a
They
reservation
don't have a
system.
reservation problem.
we fill up most weekends in the
Do you?
summer, so the reservation system is critical.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, each of your units has some partnerships that you have to deal with. Let me ask you about that, Doug. Now, at Craters of the Moon, you also have a partnership with the BLM. Am I right?
Yes, with the presidential proclamation that established the larger monument, in it stated we had to cooperatively manage the unit with BLM and the NPS. BLM pretty much retained the rangeland areas, and we managed the pretty much the black rock lava, and so our proclamation stayed. We had to cooperatively manage it.
And how does that
So
work?
Go ahead.
How does it work?
It works well. We've written several management plans together, and I think it actually helps us out quite a bit because BLM does things a little bit better in some areas, and the Park Service may have some strengths in resource or cultural resource management, and so we just sort of share each of the duties, and I think it works quite well.
Now, Gary, you have major partnerships with the tribes in the area.
Yes, we do. I think last time we counted that we have about 120 partners that we deal with in one way or another, but our most important and active partners are the tribes that we deal with, and we have a government relationship with 3 reservations: the Nez Perce tribe in Lapwai, the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation outside of Pendleton, and the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation in Nispelem, Washington. And so we spend a lot of time working with the tribes because it's largely their story that we're telling, and we want to make sure that we have their involvement as we try and tell that story.
And you're a partner with the state.
We are the state, and I partner with the National Park Service. And City of Rocks actually was a state park as early as 1957, so we were on the scene pretty early. But City of Rocks is of national significance, and it needs that status and that protection at a national level. But Congress intended to keep the partnership local, the accountability within the state of Idaho, which is one of the reasons why they chose the word reserve. And we have 2 other partners there, and one is Cassia County in terms of the roads and the protection of private property with zoning ordinances, and then the landowners themselves and the way they use the land within the reserve respectfully, and we all work together to maintain that scene.
I have a question from Mike in Nampa. Mike, go ahead.
Yes, I wondered if there was going to be any type of interpretive center at Minidoka.
Now, without your colleague here, I don't know. Can you answer?
I know that their emphasis is to begin an interpretive effort there, probably with waysides first. And but as far as a center, no, I don't know what their general management plan calls for. I'm sure it's in there.
Well, I'm sure money is an issue. How are national parks being funded these days? Gary?
Well, I would say our base funding, that's our operating funds, are in pretty decent shape right now. At least I can say that for Nez Perce National Historical Park. And we are getting a fair amount of project money out of what everybody calls the Stimulus Act, although it's the Recovery Act. And we were getting some money because of the centennial of the National Park Service coming up in 2016. So as far as the federal land managing agencies go, we're probably better off than most of the others.
And how about yours as a state?
Because we have 2 budgets,
right.
2 fiscal years, the federal part of the budget is pretty solid at City of Rocks. We've received actually an increase recently to fund a cultural resource management program. We have hired an archaeologist. Of course, on the state side, we all know what the state government is facing, and we've tightened our belt pretty tight.
Okay. I'll get this call through real quickly. Oh, it's not quite ready yet. Let me ask about the pressures from the outside. Each of the parks here in Idaho have issues, not from within the park, but pressure from without, be it growth or air quality or other issues. What issues are facing you in Craters of the Moon in terms of those outside pressures coming in?
Well, fortunately, we're surrounded predominantly by other federal lands, so we don't have a whole lot of pressure from the outside like some National Park Service can have, where there may be urban sprawl or growth that may come right up against the boundary. And many of our neighbors are BLM, so and then fortunately the communities that are adjacent to us are very small. I mean, Cary is a small community, but again, we're set aside to also maintain those agrarian lifestyles, whether it's ranching, on the monument and preserve. A lot of those activities still take place. So I think that the pressure is from outside influences is not a big issue at Craters of the Moon.
Now, how's your air quality? I know they've been
Air
monitoring
quality
that.
is pretty good. We are a Class 1 airshed, and fortunately, because of our wind patterns, we don't have a lot of impacts from upwind areas, and so our Class 1 airshed hasn't had any degradation over the past couple decades. Sorry.
That's okay. Well, let me pop up north. What outside pressures are you facing up at the Nez Perce Park?
We don't have a tremendous amount of pressure. Some of the pressures we faced recently are proposed developments, housing developments, and we have some issues with transmission lines like power lines and sewer lines and those sorts of things, but we don't have a lot of urban pressure on us, even though we're only about 10 miles outside of Lewiston for where our headquarters is. So we aren't facing a lot of them. We're pretty lucky in that regard.
Okay, well, let's go to our next caller. Wendy in Boise. Wendy.
Hi, I was just curious. I went to a park that was outside of Chalice this summer, and it was the first time I'd ever been there. It was like a converted mine, like an old mine, and they converted it to kind of like an ATV park. And I was curious. I had never been there, and I was just curious why the emphasis on making it like an ATV-focused park and how much it costs to make and maintain an ATV-style park versus like a foot traffic or bike path park.
Well, you're telling me
It is a state park. It is Bay Horse, which is associated with Land of the Yankee Fork, and that is a new unit, and that's preserving that mining history of central Idaho. The Custer Motorway is up in that area as well, and so the ATVs on the motorway was appropriate. It's a good place to be riding in that scenic country. As far as cost of that park, it's a little bit out of my region, and so I don't have numbers for dollar figure.
Do people often confuse state parks and national parks, and the Forest Service and the BLM? Who's controlling
well,
what?
Some do, and why wouldn't they when we have these unique partnerships where state and federal and BLM and NPS are all together? We try to actually manage a seamless landscape for the people, try to make our rules as close as possible as well so they can enjoy that.
Okay, let's go to...
And I think one area that all the agencies are trying to do that is updating their travel management plans.
Mm-hmm.
And what sort of activities and motorized, non-motorized across all the agencies, so that it is sort of seamless.
And Gary, you're going to say?
I was going to say the one we're confused with the most is the Forest Service. And one of the reasons is there's a Nez Perce National Historic Trail,
Right.
which is managed by the Forest Service, whereas Nez Perce National Historical Park is managed by the Park Service. And ironically, nearly all the sites that the trail connects are managed by the Park Service.
Let's go to Betty in Boise. Betty?
Hi there.
Hi.
I was wondering, we just recently went through the City of Rocks and found it very interesting. And we were wondering if they're going to pave the roads through there. And also, I'd like to know how hot it gets in the City of Rocks in the summertime.
I'll take the easy one first. We can get into the mid-90s at the very peak of the hot season. That's usually just a couple of weeks, and then we're back into the upper 80s. The other question was, are we going to pave the roads? And we're currently doing a general management plan public workshop to ask that kind of question. What do you want to see the park look like in 15 to 20 years? Right now we're leaning towards leaving them as they are, not asphalting them, to maintain that California Trail landscape appearance.
So if someone is interested in voicing their opinion on this, what should they do?
They certainly can voice their opinion, and there's several ways to do that. I would give the long website, but basically if you just go to the nps.gov's City of Rocks website, you can actually comment or write a letter to the superintendent right there on the website by contacting us and tell me what you think. We want those comments.
And that link is available on the Dialogue website.
Okay.
If you go to Dialogue, it has links to each of the individual parks in the state as well as the National Park Service national site. Are there areas in Idaho you think that are not preserved that should be? Is there something in your region that you think should be added to the National Park Service lists?
I'll toss that one to these guys.
Okay. Gary?
I really don't know. To be honest, most national parks come about because of local interest, pushing issues up to Congress. The National Park Service doesn't actually do a lot of new park studies unless they're directed by Congress anymore. So I don't really know. I've seen a lot of pretty areas. Whether they should be national parks or not, I can't say.
Well, and we did get a question on our Facebook site wanting to know why Idaho doesn't have its own national park. So let me toss that out to you. Now, we actually do have a sliver of Yellowstone. If you haven't known, you can check. There's a small part. Okay, Gary, let me toss that to you.
Well, I can take that one. There's 391 units of the National Park Service. Only 58 are national parks, and only Congress can create national parks. So the National Park Service doesn't create them, we manage them. So if people are interested in trying to create a national park somewhere in Idaho, they need to work with their congressman.
There you go. The question was the Free Saturday program a success? Doug, perhaps you could explain what the Free Saturday program is and tell us if it worked.
Well, this year, the Washington office had decided to offer 3 free weekends, one each month, June, July, and August. And I think they were a great success, especially for Craters of the Moon. We offered a Star Party program in the August session, and we were packed. I mean, our campground was full. We had more people at the Star Party than we ever have before. And actually, there is one more free feed day coming up, and it's this Saturday, September 26th.
Okay.
And at City of Rocks, we're always free.
There you go.
So come on.
And in NPS Perce, we're always free also.
There you go. So have you noticed an increase in traffic, especially as people may have been vacationing closer to home?
Visitation is up, not only for the National Park Service as a whole, but each of our individual parks. We are over 100,000 and are probably 3 to 5% ahead of last year.
And how about up north?
We're about the same as last year.
And at Craters of the Moon?
At Craters of the Moon, we're up about 20,000. We are seeing a lot of locals come to the Craters of the Moon. I think it's more of that staycation type of travel that they're doing. Obviously, there's gas prices have been up, the economy's been down, so people are just traveling in their backyards, which is great. You know, the people of Idaho should visit all the national parks within Idaho.
The state of Idaho had a big push called Be Outside, which is an effort to try and make sure we encourage kids to get outside, part of a nature deficit disorder thing. And I know the National Park Service had a similar program. Have you seen an increase in the number of kids getting out in the parks, and why should we have kids get out there?
I'll answer that briefly, and Doug can really follow up on this one. We're seeing increased family groups, that's for sure. We also are offering children programs like day camp activities, and so that's becoming more popular. But Doug is involved with Children in Nature.
Okay.
So.
Doug?
Yeah, I am involved with the Idaho Children in Nature Network and have worked quite a bit with them over the past year and a half and have watched the partnership flourish to well over 150 partners. And at Craters of the Moon, the majority of our winter activities are geared towards children. We have over 100 schools that come to the park to do snow schools, and we see about 3,000 students. And we offer free snowshoes to go out and an winter ecology program. And it's just been a great success, and it continues to grow. And unfortunately, we're starting to have to turn away some of the kids because we filled up just about every day in the week in the winter. So yes, the program is great, and many times it's the first time they've ever been out on snowshoes or seeing Craters of the Moon in a different season.
Let me try and get a call in real quick. We're running out of time, but Fred in Hagerman. Fred, go ahead.
Yes. I would like to know on the travel management plan, in the Craters Moon Preserve additional area there, it's been proposed that some of the roads be closed to public access, and it takes you into areas that's quite unique. And I was wondering why these are being restricted to the people.
There are areas that are proposed to be closed. The public comment period just ended last week. Majority of those roads that are designated to be closed are primarily on BLM land, and also a lot of those areas, the roads were redundant, in some cases just paralleled another road. But to get into the specifics, it would be kind of tough. I mean, there was over 720 miles of road that were analyzed, so we're still working on the process.
So if someone has a question, where can they go to get information about road closures in Craters?
Well, the travel management plan hasn't been finalized.
Okay.
So, the roads haven't actually been closed at this point. Until that process is finished, there are many ways that will indicate that the road is closed, possibly with signs. But out of this, we will be developing an extensive map for the entire area.
Okay. Gentlemen, I'm afraid we've run out of time. This goes by so quickly. I'd like to make sure we thank our guests in Moscow. Gary Summers, thank you, sir. I appreciate you joining us up there in Moscow.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
In Pocatello, Doug Neighbor. Doug, thank you.
Thank you.
And here in Boise, Wallace, I appreciate
Good
you
to be
being
here.
here.
Thank
Now
you.
also, we want you to make sure you know that Ken Burns, the National Parks America's Best Idea, begins airing Sunday, September 27th at 8 p.m. on our main channel and will continue each night at 8 p.m. through Thursday, October 1st. It will also air on our HD channel. If you want to find out what time for the HD broadcast in your viewing area, go to idahoptv.org and click on the schedule. If you want to learn more about the National Park Service units here in Idaho, as I said, you can go to the Dialogue website, also at idahoptv.org. You can also check out Outdoor Idaho has a number of videos that display these wonderful parts of our state. So go to idahoptv.org and check it all out. And you'll find us on Facebook. So go ahead and search Dialogue on Idaho Public Television and become a fan. And thank you for tuning in, and join us here next time for Dialogue.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho. To order a copy of this program from Idaho Public Television, call our toll-free number or visit us on the World Wide Web.